Over the years, video games have become far more complex than what we had in the 80s and 90s. Not just from like a gameplay standpoint, but production-wise. The teams are larger, there's a lot more involved. Not to discredit anybody who developed games back in the day in the 80s and 90s, but things have definitely evolved. But on the flip side of it, the consumer really hasn't changed. We just want enjoyable experiences to entertain us. Like movies, novels, and comic books, video games are something you can experience once and move on with your life to the next thing, or revisit them when nostalgia hits, or if it's just one of your favorites you like enjoying from time to time. But there is a problem. It's not a digital versus physical problem necessarily, but can you remember when buying a physical game was the end of it? You could play it whenever you wanted. It was the full game ready to go. That's not the case nowadays when it comes to console gaming. It started to feel a bit more like PC gaming, but not in a good way, in a more restricted way. Console games, depending on the system, you may have to install the game first, download updates or patches prior to playing, or even download a chunk of the game as it just wasn't included on the physical media. There have been many games released where the physical version is essentially just a key to download the game from a server on a console. A lot of games on the Switch are like this, and sometimes in the case of the Nintendo Switch, it's like a cost-saving measure for the publisher. Other times, it doesn't even matter what console. It seems like it's just because the game was rushed to be manufactured, and because the cutoff to get it on the shelf in time prohibited the full game to be on the cartridge. I absolutely hate this. It essentially has made games a disposable form of entertainment. You could still play your NES or Atari games from almost 30 years ago today without much fuss, other than figuring out how to hook everything up to a modern TV anyway, but it's essentially the same as when the game was released. What about 30 years in the future from today? What games that you bought physically recently will no longer be able to be played by just popping it into a system? I'm not just talking about the bad or dead CMOS battery concerns in PlayStation consoles that may hinder you from playing physical or digital games. And this was a big news story a few months ago, but I'm talking about games as mentioned above, a physical game that required a download, a patch, or an update in order to run. Sometimes these patches are to fix things you'd probably never have noticed, most likely would not hinder you from playing the game if you didn't download it, but some games may require it to actually enjoy it. What about games that have recently been released? As an example, Sonic Colors Ultimate, or even Cyberpunk 2077. These games are known to have glitches and performance issues with, the actual shipped game in physical form, including the digital form as well. Sonic Colors is one that people have experienced some annoying glitches across multiple consoles it was released on, but I myself, having played through the Switch version, I haven't experienced anything noticeable anyway. Maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe whatever downloaded prior to me playing it was a fix. I don't know. But it is still concerning. Sonic Colors is a game that I just never played on the Wii, and I was itching for a 3D Sonic experience I'd never had, so I was pretty excited to play this one. Now, this video that you're watching here, it's no way meant to be a review of that game, but I do have a couple things to say that a lot of people may disagree with, and that's fine. But after having played this game, I do prefer Sonic Forces over Colors. Yeah, controversial, right? But Forces, it was a game that got a lot of flack when it released, and it was one that I didn't like a whole lot initially, but it grew on me. And I wound up really liking it, and I've gone back and revisited it, the game plenty of times. Maybe it'll be the same for Colors for me eventually, but with Colors, if you really want to know what I think, well, here, fine. I'll give you guys a mini review anyway. It's like many other 3D Sonic games. Big parts of it feel like a quick time event, and you're just sitting back for the ride. It's fairly easy and short if you just fly through the game without trying to 100% it. It's not a bad game, but I feel like it's not a good one either. When you're going fast through the stages and actually using your reflexes, it feels fine, but the second you slow down or are forced to slow down, the game controls like you're swimming through jello. The platforming with how slower movements and jumping feels just really annoyed the fuck out of me. It just may not be my type of game, I don't know. But I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog should have been given bigger opportunities to shine with refined gameplay by now. But whatever, maybe you love Sonic Colors. I didn't, so if you want to come after me with pitchforks and torches over a differing opinion, maybe you need to take a step back and evaluate your life. It's just not that big of a deal to me. But moving on. So my concern with gaming today is how games are being sold to us as incomplete or not thoroughly tested games in order to get them to market in time. A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. That's a fairly old quote from Shigeru Miyamoto that I think many companies should have adopted, but even Nintendo nowadays is just as guilty of going against that philosophy. Maybe the quote should be a rushed game may be bad now, but eventually it could be good after patches and updates. But that won't be forever, because what about years down the line when the servers dishing out these patches are no longer in service? These games will be considered retro at some point in the future, but they may not be playable in their physical form, so they're just relics to look at and to line people's shelves showing they have a shit ton of games that they will never play. Not because they choose not to play them and just have them as shelf candy, but because they simply don't work. Man, that's going to be a ridiculous future, but I almost feel by then the masses who play games just won't care and will have moved on to whatever other disposable game just released. What if this was an issue with books or movies? Like in a movie, the whole second act is missing. Or in a book, chapter 2 is just a bunch of nonsensical typos, and this all hinders your enjoyment. So you have to go out and download an update to fix it. That is if the developer put out an update anyway, right? And then down the road, if there isn't an updated version available that already has all these fixes implemented, these works of art could be lost forever. And that's where preservation comes into play. But things can and will slip through the cracks and be lost forever, or access could be limited to only a select few, or just people who are in the know. Video game preservation's a very strange and weird topic to me that we may have to get into a whole separate video another time, so I do have a lot of thoughts. But I feel some people, they are actually trying to preserve the history of gaming, while others, they're just worried about preserving their own access. Human beings are selfish by nature. That's just the way it is. I ain't knocking you. But I'm not trying to think of years from now having to hunt down a ROM with the patches included that may or may not exist for a game I played on the Switch in 2021. I just want to know what I have purchased now can always be played on the original hardware it was meant for. But the harsh reality is that we're just buying a limited license to access these games. Physical or digital, it's all the same essentially. When there's no way to have access to what you purchased, there's no support for it, your license has expired, sorry. It's the same with most media out there when you really dig into it. If you buy movies digitally, you may want to read the terms of service. I mean, this is the way it seems with a lot of services out there. As an example, if you buy a movie digitally on Amazon, you're just paying for access to it. If you get banned from Amazon or your account gets terminated in some way, those movies you bought, you don't get a refund. And you don't get to transfer the license to another service, just the way it is. It's these licenses, that's how it goes. You're just being given a license to have access. It's not all negatives in my eyes when it comes to how games are served to us, but it does bother me. For every con I can think of, I'm sure people can come back with a positive. Like, as an example, if there's an exploit that's found in a game, can be patched out. Cool. Adding more content to an already completed game is kind of neat, as long as they're not charging out the ass for it. A developer balancing characters in a fighting game could be viewed as a positive for the overall community who plays it. Those are all pros in my opinion, but I just wish this technology would be used just for those purposes and not to rely on to deliver a playable experience after the fact. Ship a full game to me from the start that I'll always be able to play no matter the circumstance. That's what my wish is. That's what my hope is. But in reality, that's not the world we live in. I don't think it ever will be. But developers can learn from all these little crazy things that go on. Maybe take a little more time. Really make sure your game is a complete playable game from the start. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. Appreciate you guys.